So in today's session, we are going to talk about config maps. Okay. So what is the purpose of this config maps and how to create it? How many different types of ways to create this config map we'll discuss. So what is config map? Config map is an API object used to store non-confidential data in key value pairs. So pods can consume config maps as environment variables, command line arguments, or as configuration files in a volume. So config map allows you to decouple environment specific configuration from your container images so that your applications are easily portable. And main important thing is config map does not provide secrecy or encryption. If the data you want to store are confidential, use secret rather than a config map. Okay. So what is the purpose of this config map is generally hmm, so assume this is our infrastructure environment and assume this might be our machines. Okay. So now whenever you are deploying any application, whether it's a microservice or full-fledged application, okay. So when you're deploying the applications, applications will have some properties. I will show you application, one of the application. Mm, or else directly I'll go to the. This is one of the Java Spring Boot application, which is called Pet Clinic for pets. We can create a website with this Spring Boot application. We have a free, it's an open source application. So in the GitHub, we can able to get the source code, the complete application. Okay, and you see, whenever I think when you are doing the DevOps practice, at that time you might be using Java as an example to build the application in the Maven. When we were discussing Maven, you might be discussed about MVN clean deploy install, right? At that time, you might seen the structure, web application structure, directory structure. The main and test will be there in the real time. Also, same if the Java application is there. Main means the content will be inside the main, the code, and test cases will be written inside the test directory. So if you go to the in directory, uh, here you can see this path. Go inside this, and this is completely related to the Java coding application. Okay, so here where it is. Mhm. Okay, inside the resources directory means there is a separate directory called resources. There we have some properties files. If you see, for every application there will be a properties file. So what is this properties file? If I open this application or properties file, you see this is a key value pair. Understood, right? So when this application is going to start, this Java application is going to start, it will take these values from this properties file and it will start the application. If you see this application.properties file, so some values has been set. So based upon this, that application will run. Okay. And if you see here, spring.data source.schema. So the path is this has been set. Okay. And logging information. Compulsory if the Java application will be there. This kind of whenever in case you got opportunity to work on uh, creating Kubernetes cluster, deploying the application, then you need to if you are working with Java application, then definitely for that Java microservice, for every microservice it is going to have one properties file compulsory if you are working with the Java application. So the functionality how it should work, if you see here logging information, by default this is enabled. Means info means what? Application, whenever you go and check in the log file of application, it will give you the only info, not the errors, warnings it will give. So if you give debug means it will give more information, but as of now this is commented. So these kind of properties will be like values will be set inside the properties file. So based on this, that application will work. Okay. And if you go back one step, you can see another properties file also here, application-mysql.properties file. So here what it is defined, database related, means this application is need to connect to the database. Okay. So what is the database type, and database URL to connect the database, and username to connect the database, and password to connect the database, right? Means this website is expecting a database and the database should able to connect. So when we deploy this application, actually this along with the application it will create database pod also, so that automatically it will collect. We don't need to do anything, so because everything in the database related configuration, everything they have configured inside this chart, so we don't need to do everything that we'll discuss later. So here main important is basically these properties values also will be in the same file itself in real time most of the time. Means they don't need to be separate files. Database information also you can configure here itself. Okay. So assume below this line we have configured database related stuff, like this is a database server, and this is a database username, password, and the port, host name, or your IP address will be defined, so that this application whenever it is starting it will go and connect to the database. If the database is not available, then this application will not come online properly, because it should connect to the database compulsory, because it is mentioned here that it should connect. Then only if you see here, if it is not connected, then it will not function properly. Your application will not function properly because it should fetch the information from the database only, right? So whenever this code will be where, this is a source code, means developers are writing here. If you go to the main, so this is complete this application are dealing with the developers place. This is not belongs to as a DevOps engineers, because this is an application code. We are not we can give only permission in GitHub or Bitbucket to whom we should give access for this repository, but we are not dealing how who is managing this, how what are the changes, code level changes are doing, that is responsibility of the developers. So it's their stuff. Our DevOps engineer stuff will be something else, like we have a we are working with Ansible, we are creating Ansible playbooks. Okay, that we are the owner for the Ansible playbooks. We create Terraform scripts, so we put one repository, and we'll put all the Terraform scripts over there, or ARM templates, or any shell scripting, Python scripting, which we are dealing with DevOps guys. We are the owner for that, and these repository owners will be developers. They are changing the code. They will go here and they'll write the code here. Okay, so if you see this, all these files, it's their responsibility to write all these files, the code level changes, right? So we are not the responsible. They will connect to this repository and clone it, and they will do the changes again. They will push it, and the application or properties also, it's their responsibility to manage it. So now whenever, so this is basically ConfigMap, we can finish it in 5 minutes, but how exactly it will be used in the real time, I'm explaining you from the scratch. Okay, so that when you get opportunity, so easily you can able to work with ConfigMaps because it's very, very important. So this is source code. It can be Bitbucket, it can be SVN, or it can be GitHub, anything. Okay, source code management, and the developers will clone the code and they will do the check-in. And whenever they push the code, if it is configured with webhooks, then immediately Jenkins will pick up the code and it will build. Okay, it will create an artifact. If you remember the Maven, okay, so what it will do? So Jenkins will pick up and it will create mvn clean deploy or mvn create package. It will create an artifact. So if it is a web, then it will be create a var, and that var will go and store inside the artifactory. So here this artifactory will store this, either this can be Nexus or JFrog or any cloud related artifactories like ACR or ECR or GCR. These are cloud related artifacts. It can be anything. On premises means you can use these things. And what it will create with this var, it can create an image also, Docker image. Means in the CA job itself, already shown you the CA job, example CA job. The stages will be there in the pipeline. So first it will clone the code and then it will create an artifact, and that var file, with the help of var file, it will create an Docker image. This will be in the CA job, and this image will go and store inside the repository, right? And after that, in the CD job, we are going to deploy. So we will deploy this image inside the Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So now assume this is one of the microservice we are deploying, and it is getting deployed on this particular pod, and this name is, assume the name of this microservice application microservice is, give some name. Okay, ABC, this microservice name is. And one more microservice also is in separate GitHub repository, the code, and that is also get deployed here. And this is the name of this another microservice. Okay, so here one microservice, sometimes just now we have seen the application is trying to connect database. Same way here also, this microservice or application wants to connect the database, and also this want to connect to this one also. Like we discussed in the services class, cluster IP purpose is what? Internal cluster communication, means one service want to communicate with the other service. Okay, so then we create cluster IP, means this microservice no need to access from the external world. Then we can create cluster IP for this one, so that if internally any other microservice or application trying to connect to this um, microservice, then we should create a cluster IP service, so that the name of that cluster IP we will provide to the service, okay, microservice which is trying to connect, the name, service discovery name. So automatically it will pick up the IP address of that service, so that we can give. So where you are going to give that information, you are going to give inside the properties file. So in the same properties file here, which I have shown you, in the same properties file, we are going to give the name. Okay, that the service name is there equal to that name, so that it will go and connect to that service. Like how it's trying to connect the database, Same way it will try to connect to the service. So that information also we will give in the properties file. Okay. Previously, assume there is no Kubernetes concept that application want to connect. So what they used to give, they will give, assume this is in the virtual machine. Assume this is one virtual machine, this is one virtual machine, and we'll give this virtual machine IP inside the properties file. Okay. So means whatever the name which you want to connect, that name we will give equal to this IP. So whenever this this application is trying to connect to this application, it will take this virtual machine IP. But here it's a pods concept. Okay, Kubernetes cluster concept. So what we can give, we cannot give the pod name. So we need to give the service which we are creating for this microservice, and that service name we are providing here inside this service properties file, so that this service can able to connect. Whether this service is externally accessing, then we'll use load balancer as a service, and what are the name you define it, that name we'll give here. If this is not required to access from the external world, then we'll create cluster IP concept, and that name of that cluster IP service we'll give it here. Okay. So this is how we'll connect internally. So that information also we'll give inside the application dot properties file itself. Okay. And one more scenario is database. Whether your database is inside the cluster or maybe your database is externally configured, maybe it's in a PaaS service. Okay, in AWS if it is an RDS, in Azure you have an external database service. That is a scenario, or maybe it is on your on-premises based upon that database IP, port number, username, password, that will be also available. Okay, good. Now assume this is a cluster IP service I configured for this microservice. Cluster IP name is my service. Okay, this is the name. So this name has been defined inside the application dot properties. Here, wherever the code is there, the source code for that microservice is there in the application dot properties. CDE equal to my service is the service name we are giving. So when it got deployed, it will, whenever it is coming online, it will check for the internally cluster my service. If it is there, then it will connect to this application. Assume I changed this service name, means next time when I'm creating the service for this microservice, I changed it to something else. Okay, so something like 01. Then next time when you restart this microservice, it will try to connect my service cluster IP, but it will not be available. Then what it will do, it will not connect because it did not find the name. Then how we are going to change it for this application? You will inform to the developers that the service name has been changed, so that they will change the CD equal to here my01, so that whenever they do the changes immediately with the help of webhooks, Docker CI job will execute, because code level changes, whenever the code check-in happens, it will execute the CI job. It will create new var and it will create a Docker image, and CI will be completed. And with this latest image, again you need to deploy the application, that same application. Then this contains properties contains my service 01, so that it can go and connect to this application. Same way to the database also. If the database is having uh, my database, the database name, or maybe the password, username is, so username equal to ABC, and password was 123456, but password has been changed. So this information you need to update in the properties file, and again your pod should be restarted. So that means whenever you change in the application or properties file, again the new image should be created, because in the image it will contain the latest properties file which has been modified. and then that image you need to deploy. So whenever if there is any changes in the application.properties file, always you are keep on modifying it, you are creating a new var file. But it is not necessary, right? Why? Because they are not changing in the application coding level. If the application coding level is changing, then there might be new changes. So that's why we are creating a new var, and then with that we are creating image. But there is no need, they are not doing any application code level modifications, they are doing only properties they are doing. So in the Kubernetes, we have a concept called config maps. Okay. So what is this config maps to? Whatever this application.properties file is there, this will be inside the application only. We'll copy all these properties from this file to in the Kubernetes. We have an object called config maps. We'll put all this content inside this config maps, and this config map we will give at the time of deployment. Let's say in the you are creating a type called deployment.yaml or maybe pod.yaml file to create a pod. So inside that spec field, we are going to give config maps, and we'll give the name of this config map, what are the config map you are going to create. So this config map contains the complete information, means whatever this file contains, all this information will be in the config maps. So when this for the first time when the pod is getting created, we'll give this config maps also. And as I said, all these properties will be available here inside this one. So at the runtime of this application, it will take all the key value pairs from this config maps, and it will start. Okay. In future, as I said, if some passwords has been changed, you no need to modify here. Okay. You can modify in the config maps, and again you retry, you restart or redeploy the pod here. Only if you execute cd job here, then it will take the values from the config maps. Understood? So config maps also containing the same. So why we are giving here? Because if assume hundreds of values, key value pairs are inside the key value pair inside your application or properties file. So all those key value pairs, if you are mentioning here, in future, if you want to change any of the key value, then you no need to go again here, modify here, ca job, new docker image, not required. In the config map, we change the value. Okay. When we change the key value pair and again we redeploy that pod, then at the runtime it will expect the config maps. Okay. So it is expecting to take the value from this config maps. So it will take the new value from this config map and it will apply to that pod. Okay. So that's why we create config maps. So what is telling here uh, in the caution, where it is. So don't use, if the data you want to store are confidential, use a secret. Means in the properties file, I am mentioning it should connect the database also. So database username password is confidential. So we cannot give blindly username password inside the config maps. For that we should use secrets. Okay, secrets and config maps both are almost same. Only thing is config map will be in the plain text format, and secrets will be in the encoded format, not encrypted, encoded format. That is the only difference. Okay. So in the config maps directly, if someone opens that config map, it will be clearly seen username equal to this one and password equal to this one. Okay. In the plain clear text format, it will be available. Apart from credentials, any keys, okay, remaining all the key value pairs you can use inside this config maps. So this is about the config maps, which is very important if you are deploying any application. So we'll definitely create a config maps. and this will be provided by the developers. So because this application.properties will be provided by the developers, with the help of this we'll create config maps, and all this will be available inside this. Key values will be available here. So whenever you want to change any, suppose I was showing you that log, right? Log is showing as an info. Suppose application is not functioning properly, you application guys want to troubleshoot, then how they will troubleshoot? By checking the logs. So logs is coming only info, so they want to see in depth, then they ask us to debug. Okay, mention the remove info and put it as a debug. So to do this, what we need to do, we need to comment this and we need to enable this feature. So this property you enable. So if you're doing this, again you no need to create a CI job, create a new Docker image. So unnecessary creating multiple Docker images, because when the Docker image, when the var should create, if there is any changes in the code level, okay, then the new image is going to be necessary. But here nothing is changing from the code level. So here in the config maps we can do modification, remove info and then mention debug, and then again we'll execute cd job, so that while deploying it will take the config maps and it will take the latest value whatever we define inside the config maps. So if you don't mention config maps, then application will get deployed whatever is inside that file. Okay, means whenever it's creating image, whatever the file values was there, it will take by default those values. If you are giving config maps, means it is overwriting those values and it is applying these values to your pod. That is the purpose of config map. So here you are not creating unnecessary Docker images, and sometimes see, it will take lot of time. CI job means in real time, it will take lot of time to complete that CI job, because lot of test cases will be there, everything should run, lot of time will take, but and that is waste, and creating multiple Docker images is also waste. So the same image we can use, only the properties we are going to change with the config maps. This is how we use in the real time scenarios. Okay, so we can create this config maps in three different ways: directories, files, literal values. In these three ways we can create this config map. So if you see here, configure, so if you see here, config map, kubectl create config map, and the name of your config map and source. Okay, so here if you see, create config maps from directories. So from directories means, if you just now we have seen for this pet clinic, it's showing two properties files, right? So if you have more than one properties file, then you can create a directory, and inside that you can mention the values, okay, the files of your properties files, and with the directory you can create. So both the properties files will be created as a single config map. If you have more than one, it can be two, three, four properties files are there, altogether you can put it in a one directory, and with the help of the directory we can create config maps. Here it is showing one example. So it's getting downloaded two config maps from the Kubernetes sites itself. One is game.properties and ui.properties. Two files we can download locally into one directory, and that directory name we can use while creating this config map. You see, this is a directory name, it is getting created directory, and this is subdirectory, and we are downloading these two files inside the directory, and then create config map. This is the config map name, and then --- from -file. Okay, this is a key we are giving, and this is a directory. So whatever files are available inside this directory, with the help of that, it will create a config map. Okay, so the output is similar to this. So you can check the describe command of this config map. So we can see the data. This is game.properties. See values. These are the values, and this is UI.properties values. These two files values will be there. Okay, so this is another method. Create config maps from files means single file is there. Only if you have single file, then you can use kubectl create config map game-config. This is the name we are giving, and --- from file equal to, this is a path, and this is a single file name we are giving. So the single file also we can able to create config maps. Okay, and where is the literal? So when I was building, when I was deploying the application, I was only person who is handling this Kubernetes. So at that time, I was creating the config maps for the applications, the microservices. So sometimes, see, this is very very important. --- from -env -file, and --- from -file. Initially, I was using this option. Config maps getting created, but application couldn't able to take the config map values. Okay, so then I was using this --- from -env -file. How that properties file has been designed, based on that you need to check. When you deploy the application, you need to test it whether it is taking the config maps values or internal values only, because your application also contains one properties file which is available by default in the code, but you are giving some values from the outside within the config maps. Okay, so that you need to confirm whether it is applying or not. Suppose here the name is my service 01, and in this main application.properties file, it is having my service only. So when this application is getting started, in the logs we can see whether it's trying to connect my service 01 or my service. If it is connecting to my service, but in the config maps you mentioned my service 01, which means it is not taking the value of your my service. So for the first time, you need to know how your properties file is there. Based on that, which one is suitable? This is -env environment variable way. Is it configured, or normal properties it is configured? That will be decided. Okay, only two options are there: --- from -file, or --- from -env -file. These are the two different types. So you can test it by creating your config maps in both the ways. How it is working, you'll come to know. Okay. So now we'll see, we'll create these config maps. I don't have any application for you to show that testing. Okay. Yes, we can create that application config maps. For that, let me power on the AWS. I think it's already powered on. I hope you guys are understanding, right? Yeah, Shivraj, tell me. What is the question? Shivraj, are you there?
I think he pasted his question in the chat.
Okay, let me check that.
Where does the config file reside?
Where does ConfigMap file means which file?
I think just we are talking about the config files, right? If it is 1 or 2, are they going to be in a folder or?
See, as I said, microservices contains their application.properties file in the each microservice repository, and this application.properties file will take it as an administrators, Kubernetes administrators will have in our anywhere, okay, wherever we want to execute the kubectl command. So in that location, locally you should have that. Right now I'm executing from the master server, so it should be available in the master. Suppose if it is an GKE or AKS, then you are executing command from your local laptop, right? kubectl command. Then it should be in your local. Those files should be. So that whenever you are creating kubectl create command config map, then you are giving the path hyphen from hyphen file equal to the path you are giving. So where is that path? So if it is in your local, then you should give that local path. Right now I'm executing it from the master server, so it should be inside the master server. If you're executing from your local laptop, that kubectl command, then it should be inside your local machine. Okay, so we'll ask developers to give those files so that if you have 10 microservices, 10 microservices having uh, properties file for each and every microservice, then we'll take all those 10 and we'll create 10 config maps for each microservice and we'll name it with that application microservice name. There will be compulsory, there will be microservice name will be there. So with that, we'll name it. Okay. So here, so first what we'll do, we'll create a directory. So as per this documentation, create the local directory, or else if you are how you are accessing your cluster, it depends. If you don't have master, if it is not a bare metal, if it is an as I said GKE AKS, then you are going to send kubectl command from your, if it is an AKS, then you are going to use PowerShell or maybe CMD to connect your AKS cluster. If it is an GKE, then you might be using CMD. Okay, so from here you might be using kubectl command. So locally you'll install kubectl, and as I said, we'll copy that config file into your local, and from here we will send the API request like kubectl get nodes, get pods, whatever you're typing, it will connect to the cluster, will use information. So at that time, in your present working directory, you should have the all the properties file so that you can use kubectl create um, config maps and then hyphen from hyphen file, then equal to the present working directory location, whatever is there, wherever you are in your laptop you store those files, that location you need to give to create the config map. Okay, so now I'm in the master, and so as per their recommendation I'm creating a directory, and then through wget we are going to download two files. CD. So already this directory was created. Okay. So I should go inside the directory and then I need to execute this wget command so that it will download in the present working directory. Okay, no need because already here it is mentioned the path. So it will go and download there. Okay. So we no need to go inside the directory, not mandatory, because here if no output should be stored inside this specific path. So I'm downloading the second one. So now I'll go inside that path and we'll see two files has been downloaded. Okay. So now with the help of this, we can create a config map. You can see here kubectl create config map, and this is a name for config map we are giving --- from -file and equal to this is the directory. So these are creating from the directory. Okay. So let me copy this. So whatever the files you have inside that, it will apply to all those files. Okay. So this is a relative path. It's already exists. So what I'm going to do, I will give the name -01. Okay. So config map has been created. If you want to see kubectl get cm, it's shortcut for config maps. You can see this is the one just now got created. Okay. Config map has been created. So always remember when we discussed about namespace, when you create config maps, I did not give any namespace. So by default, it got created in the default namespace. So when you are deploying the application, your config map is in the default namespace and your pod is getting created in different namespace. But in the pod specification, if you give this config map, it cannot access. Okay, it cannot take from this one. It will give you error config map not found, or it will take by default internal properties file and it will come online, or else it will not start when we are, for example, when we are deploying the application through Helm chart. At that time it will not get deployed, it will get failed because it will say config map not found. So always remember config maps or secrets all should be in the same namespace. When you're deploying the application pod in a different namespace and you are trying to use the config map of another namespace, it will not work. Resources should belongs to the same namespace all. Okay, then only it will work. So right now this is in the default namespace, and if you see with the describe command, so with the describe command, kubectl describe cm. So if you see, this is the data which is inside this way. Okay, this is the UI properties and this is game.properties values. So this might be using for some application. If you see color.good equal to purple, color.bad equal to yellow. Okay, so these properties might be using for some application to run. So that application will use these properties and based on that it will function. So create config maps from files. So create config map from files is nothing but, let's say, same directory. Instead of two files, assume we have only one file. Then we can give that file name directly. Basically, in real time, most of the times we'll use this one. If in case we have only single properties file for your application, no need to give the directory. Only simple is, previously we are giving till here directory. So whatever the files was there inside directory, all got applied. But now if it is a single file, then give that file name here. That's it. It will get created. Now the same command I'll execute, but I need to change the name. Okay, here give some other name. Let's say 02. Got created. kubectl get cm, and this is the one, kubectl describe cm. So it's showing only game.properties values, it is only showing. Okay, this is based upon the files. Like we are talking about here, directories, files, literal values. So from directories how to create, from files how to create, and now we'll see literal values. So where is it? Literal values. And one important thing is, when you are talking about Helm charts at that time, see, initially when you are building the cluster, you will create this manually, right? But once you start creating the cluster, building everything, we expect everything should be automated. You are doing this manual stuff. Manually, I'm creating this config map. But when the application is getting deployed, I want this should be created along with the deployment itself. I don't want to create it manually. Right now, I'm creating manually the config map, and then I'll deploy the application. Means I'll execute the pod or deployment.yaml file to deploy the application, right? But in real time, your CD job should do that, not you are doing manually creating. So config map should be created. So in the Helm charts, we will provide the config map file. Okay. So how to convert that? With the help of this command, you are going to get a YAML file. Like how your deployment.yaml file is available, the same way your config map will also will be converted into that. It's very simple by using this. Where is that command? This one. kubectl get config map, your config map name -o YAML. Then it will be shown in this way. Okay. So this you can copy and you can put it in the Helm chart. So when the deployment job is happening at that time, it will use this file and it will create the config map. Okay. So as of now, when you describe, it is showing in this way. There is no like, if you look into the deployment.yaml file, pod.yaml file, there is an API version, kind, specs, all these things are right. So if you want in that manner, then kubectl get cm. Get means it's an information, just output I want in the YAML file. That's it. So if you see here, API version, data, kind, config map. So this way. So this we can copy, and again I'll show you when we talk about Helm charts. There we will define this config map detail, because in Helm chart you are going to define everything while deploying. If the volume should be created, if the config map should be created, any objects if you are trying to create to run that microservice, all those components will be in the Helm chart. Helm chart is combination of multiple objects or resources to create all together. Those files will be in a single chart. That's it. Okay. So there we will give this YAML file in this manner, so that at the time of deploying sequentially, it is going to create whatever the necessary things is required to run that application on a pod. If the volume should be created, if the config map should be created, if secret should be created, if any other resources should be created, whatever is defined in that Helm chart, everything gets created and application will run automatically. That is all we need to do in the real time. Everything should be automated. Manually, we will not go and create each and every object, right? So that's how it will help. Any object, you can get it in this way. -o YAML means it will show in the YAML format. Okay. So config map, this way it will help you. And literal values, there is literal. This literal values is, you are not going to give any file, any directories. You are giving key value pair in the command itself. Okay. Here if you see, literal special dot how equal to vary, and special dot type equal to charm, and this is the key and this is a value. This is the key, this is a value. Basically, in the previous topic, we have a file. Inside that file we have a key value pair. These are basically, these are key, this is the value, right? So we have a file. Inside that file, key value pair contains, but in the literal there will be no file. In the command itself you are giving what is the key, what is the value. Okay, this way also you can give it. Okay, so you need to do practice, and then only you can able to understand all these things, and need to read the complete documentation. When you do practice, then only you can able to understand it. Okay, so when you use this config map, so it will take this special dot how, very special dot type charm. So these two values it is going to take it. Okay, these are just an example. The real example I shown you here. Okay, in the pet clinic website, how this will be there. So if you
Yeah.
don't do any
So
modification,
Praveen,
yeah,
so we can give any number of values in this literal section. I mean key value.
yes, value pair, yes, multiple key
Okay.
value pairs you can give in the literal values.
So then what is the best way, the first one or the second one?
See, mostly it will be hyphen hyphen, as I said here, from, as I said, files, if multiple files are there for properties, then you should use directories. Means very simple, that is, you are not specifying any specific file name, you are just giving the directory name. If you have only single file name, then you should give the file value. See, creating from directories means what? If you have more than one file as an properties file, then you use this one. Okay, create config map, the directory name which contains the files. If you don't have multiple files, only single file, then give this directory name and the file name, whatever that single file is that. That's it. From hyphen file. Mostly we don't use literal values. 95% we use this concept only. If you have multiple files, then give the directory name. If you have single file, then give the file name while creating config maps. Okay. So only thing is, in the config maps, you should not define uh, credentials. Okay. Some in my, I will tell you my organization setup, like where I'm working. There we are giving the credentials in the config map. Why? Because what are the credentials we are using? We are using already some other tool to encrypt those credentials, and that value we are providing inside the config maps. So even if someone looks into it also, they are not going to access to the application, because it is encrypted with the tool, and when the application is getting started, there it will, in the application itself, it will be decrypted. So we don't need to worry about that. So that's why we are using the credentials inside the config map only. Okay. But if you don't have any other mechanism in such way in your organization, then you should use the secret concept. So like in Ansible Vault, you have secret. Okay, you are going to store the credentials, right? Same way here also, you can use secret, means when you are creating credentials, it will be encoded. Okay, that way you need to provide credentials in the secrets. We'll discuss about secret later on. So this is about the config maps. Actually, we can finish it in 5 to 10 minutes, this config maps. But it's very important to know how really we use this config map in the organizations is very, very important. So if you have any doubts, you can ask me, or else we'll wind up for today's session. So tomorrow we'll come up with some new topics like node selectors, init containers, what is init containers, some other small topics all together. We'll finish in tomorrow's session.
Hey, Praveen, I need to do last 3 or 4 classes. I was busy otherwise. But basically, does the AWS servers, if we created one for a couple of nodes and one cluster, is that enough, or do I need to have an account in a GCP as well and work with these exercises?
See, if you use GCP, then it will be good because you are getting free, right? Free tier
Yeah.
account and 20,000 they are crediting. In AWS, at least you need to use one T2.medium instance for your master.
So without having
So
anything
better
in
I
it,
suggest.
okay, without having anything in AWS, I can just work in the GCP, right, for all these exercises?
Yes.
Okay.
Praveen,
Okay.
I have a
Yeah.
question. It's related to the Docker. How do we, do a Docker scanning? Okay, let's say I have created a Docker image. Okay, so how do I do a security check of that?
So what you
Whether
want to check?
each layer is working fine or not, every layer. I mean, how do I, because when I create that Docker image, so it is in a package now, which includes other dependencies. Okay, so how do I, check to see whether, there are any vulnerabilities for that particular packages or dependencies?
So that will be Docker, I think, Docker Clear.
Because actually, this was a question from a client.
So this
We were
you
not
can
given
find Docker bench.
Okay.
Okay. So Docker bench for security script that checks for dozens of common best practices around deploying Docker containers in production. So you can go with this one, Docker bench. You can go through this and you can use this one.
So this will scan or parse every layer of the Docker image.
Yeah, you can go through this. I never went through
Okay.
this. Okay, documentation. So what it will do, scanning, how it will do, everything they'll mention some scenarios. So you can check whether it will fulfill your requirement.
Okay. Okay. I'll do that. Okay. And one more question, simple question. So in CI/CD, okay, in CD, so D stands for delivery or deployment?
Deployment. See, when what we are talking here is it's a deployment. So CI, CD and another CD will be there. Two CDs will be there. Okay. One
Okay.
CD is for deployment, another CD is for delivery.
So what, how it is in, what is the difference basically?
That you will come in the DevOps classes, right? So you complete already DevOps?
No, I was just asking, Praveen.
No, I'm also just asking, like you, because here some guys are coming from DevOps batch. Okay. So it's mixed of DevOps guys and Kubernetes batch. So I'm just checking whether you are from the DevOps batch or
No, directly.
directly
Only
joined from the
Kubernetes.
Kubernetes batch.
Directly Kubernetes.
Okay. Did you do the Kubernetes DevOps previously?
Yeah.
Okay. So this will be cleared over there itself, right? What is the different CDs, deployment and delivery?
I mean, I just read on my own. I had this doubt.
Okay. So the deliver continuous deployment means whenever the application you want to deploy onto the environment, whether it's a virtual machine or maybe cluster, whatever it may be, the deployment will be there. And delivery means the final whatever we are delivering. Okay, means all together whether the applications are running fine or not. So we are giving it to the end users to access it after deploying the application. That is called as a delivery.